Foreign policy is never the theme of an entire day.
How about that?
And I think from a Republican perspective, it just goes to show how wrong things are going around the world. We think, obviously in August of 2021, we saw 13 of our best young men and women killed in that disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. We, of course, in the Trump administration, I was a part of the Abraham Accords team. We handed four historic peace deals over. Then you have Afghanistan fall. Then, of course, you have Russia, you have Putin invade Ukraine. And then last year on October 7th, we saw the horrific murders from Hamas invading Israel. And I'm sure we will get reminded tonight, 10 months later, we still have 5 Americans that are held hostage by a terror regime. Not only do you have the President of the United States with an former President of the United States with an attempted assassination over the weekend, as I've been saying for years, this isn't new news. The Iranian regime has active plots on U.S. soil against former President Trump, against my former boss, Mike Pompeo, Brian Hook, and other senior administration officials. It's unprecedented that an enemy state of the United States would have these many plots against officials where they require, for the past 3.5 years, 24/7 security. Never happened in U.S. history. And then, of course, you're worried about what's happening with China around the world. And I think that Americans are very concerned. They're not only concerned about what's happening at the grocery store, but they're concerned because there feels like there is a chaotic world out there and that nobody is really in control.
Well, so let's pick a few parts of the chaos, shall we? You mentioned, for example, the war in Ukraine, which we know that J.D. Vance is not an advocate for continuing to fund in the U.S. He thinks some kind of negotiated peace is the most realistic outcome. Former President Trump, of course, has said he could end that war in one day. Do you actually believe that? What would a Trump-Vance ticket, president and vice president, ultimately mean for a resolution to that war?
So J.D. Vance is a good friend of mine. I think he's a great pick, but it is the president of the United States, if Trump is reelected, who sets the foreign policy, and he does that with the Secretary of State. And so the foreign policy will be up to the president. Having served in the last 2 years of his administration, and by the way, I've served in 4 administrations, Republicans and Democrats, so I've got a lot of background here. In the last administration, for the last 2 years, we actually provided lethal weapons to the Ukrainians. We had more sanctions and more actions against Russia than any president in modern history since the Cold War, since Reagan. And so when you look, not only were we providing lethal weapons to Ukraine, we were renegotiating New START, we were sanctioning Nord Stream 2. This is an energy discussion that I know you guys have had on Bloomberg. Why does that matter? Because it's not like we're pontificating about what foreign policy would be. We know that we actually took a very strong stance against Russia and supportive of Ukraine in the last administration. Unfortunately, there's a series of probably 10 to 20 different deterrence failures from the Biden administration that led to where we are today. I'm one of those Republicans who are incredibly critical of the delay of weapons over the past 2 years. And listen, if you look at it from an economic perspective, we have, the truth is that the Russian economy is doing better than it was before the invasion. The initial sanctions tranche, and I spent years of my life at the Treasury as an analyst doing sanctions, the initial sanctions tranche that the Biden administration did with the Europeans was fantastic, but it was never followed up on secondary sanctions. We never took Russian banks off the market. We never prevented them from exporting oil and energy or from their minerals and mining. And so, even our LNG export ban in January, for example, we've seen billions of dollars, $21 billion just in 2022, that Russia gained from their LNG exports that they were able to use to fund their war machine. So the sad reality is they actually have figured out how to circumvent our sanctions, and they have this, what I call, supply chain of terror between Russia, Tehran, North Korea, and China, where they are able to resupply themselves from a munitions perspective with drones, ballistic hardware. They're actually resupplying themselves faster from a munitions perspective than the West can, and that's, I think, should be incredibly concerning to all of us.
Well, it's interesting. I don't know if you're implying that a Trump 2.0 would pursue secondary sanctions, because we've asked a lot of lawmakers about this. You would push for it. Okay. Well, that's really interesting, because Donald Trump says he can end this war on day one, that it's a phone call, this thing is over. We don't need secondary sanctions in a world like that. You've been in this game for a long time. Do you take a commander-in-chief seriously talking like that?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think he has there's no doubt, if you look at it from a policy perspective and not a rhetoric perspective, we were much tougher on Russia than the Biden administration
But how do you end a war
tougher.
in one afternoon?
Well, I mean, listen, we don't know if Trump is elected. We have no clue what we will inherit in January of 2025. So who knows what you're going to get there. So you'll have to deal with the situation there. Obviously, he's going to have a tough negotiation. So you ask yourselves, the people now who are negotiating to get 5 Americans out 10 months later from a terrorist group, they can't get these Americans out. They can't finish a negotiation between Israel and Hamas. These are the people that you think will be better negotiators than we are. When we negotiated the Abraham Accords, sorry, I know the negotiators. I was a part of the team. I'd bet on the Trump negotiating team every day of the week.
Who are you betting on will be Secretary of State as part of that team?
I think that he has a ton of people to choose from. I don't know if these people are interested, but I will just tell you what I think. I think Rubio is incredibly impressive. Bill Hagerty, my senator. Listen, I'm biased. I'm from Tennessee. He's my senator. Rick Grinnell has a very close relationship. Tom Cotton is another senator who's been in the foreign policy side for a long time. So I wouldn't be surprised if the president picks an ally from the Senate.